There are forces in life that you cannot see, but you can feel their weight. Sometimes it shows up as constant delay, sometimes as repeated failure, sometimes as invisible resistance that blocks every step forward. People call it bad luck, misfortune, or even generational curses. But what if I told you that simple, humble salt could become a weapon in your hands, a tool to cleanse, to protect, and to break invisible chains? Today, I will show you how even the smallest act of faith can shift the unseen world around you. Break every curse and see what happens next. When we speak of curses, many people immediately imagine something ancient, something dramatic, tied to rituals or strange practices. But the reality is often more subtle, more hidden, and yet far more powerful. A curse is not always an obvious spell cast over you by another. Sometimes it is the negative energy that was spoken into your life, the words of defeat or condemnation that took root in your mind and in your spirit. Sometimes it is a pattern of failure and loss that follows your family line, passed down from generation to generation like an invisible shadow. And sometimes it is simply the accumulation of fear, resentment, and unresolved pain that chains you to the same experiences again and again. This is why I say not every battle is visible. You cannot always point to what is holding you back, but you can feel it. You can sense it when doors that should have opened remain shut. You can feel it when relationships keep breaking at the same point, when finances collapse no matter how hard you work, when opportunities slip through your fingers at the very last moment. People call it coincidence, they call it bad luck. But deep down you know it is not random. It is a pattern, and patterns have roots. The unseen world is not a fantasy. It is a reality that affects every aspect of our lives. Just as you cannot see electricity with your eyes, but you experience its effects, you cannot see the curse with your eyes, but you live with its consequences. If you only fight with your hands, you will always feel outmatched. Because the source is not in the physical. The source is deeper, in the realm of the unseen. And unless you deal with it at the root, you will always be left cutting at branches that grow back again. That is why we must first acknowledge the existence of these invisible chains. To deny them is to remain bound by them. To recognize them is to begin loosening their grip. A person who accepts that there are spiritual realities at play is no longer blind. He becomes aware, he becomes alert, and he can begin to fight with the right tools. You cannot heal what you refuse to see. You cannot break what you do not acknowledge exists. So as we speak about salt, about cleansing, about breaking free, it is not just about a ritual. It is about addressing the reality that much of what holds us is not visible to the eye. And when you begin to confront the unseen, you will notice how life itself begins to respond. Because every curse has a weakness, and once exposed, it can no longer control you. Salt is something so ordinary that most people overlook its significance. It sits quietly in every kitchen, used daily without much thought. Yet throughout history, across cultures and spiritual traditions, salt has always been more than just seasoning. It has been a symbol of purity, of preservation, and of covenant. In the ancient world, salt was so valuable that it was considered a form of currency. Armies were paid with it, sacred offerings were sealed with it, and entire agreements between people were confirmed by sharing it. To them, salt was not just a mineral, it was life itself, because it preserved what would otherwise decay. When we look deeper, we begin to understand why salt carries such spiritual weight. Salt does not spoil, it resists corruption, it protects against decay. That is why it has always been linked to purity and cleansing. Wherever salt is placed, it declares that what is rotten cannot remain. It becomes a shield against what seeks to destroy. And this is exactly why it is so powerful when used with intention. Because salt speaks the language of preservation. It says, life will remain, purity will remain, protection will remain. Think about it for a moment. Why do we season food with salt? Because without it, flavor is dull, lifeless, and unprotected from spoiling. In the same way, when salt is applied spiritually, it restores what has lost its strength, it shields what has been vulnerable, and it gives life back to what was fading. It is simple, but simplicity is often where true power hides. Now, when you pour salt with faith into the spaces of your life, you are not just scattering grains of white powder. You are making a declaration. You are saying, this place is cleansed, this environment is protected. No corruption, no darkness, no curse is allowed to remain here. Salt becomes a visible symbol of an invisible authority. And when you understand this, you realize that even the smallest act, like sprinkling salt in your home, is an act of claiming dominion over your space. The toilet may seem like an unusual place to use salt, but when you recognize that it represents disposal, the logic becomes clear. Salt in this context is a statement, What does not belong here will not just be flushed away, it will be purified as it leaves. You are not merely removing waste, you are breaking agreements with negativity, cutting off ties with decay, and declaring that nothing corrupt will find its way back. Salt makes that separation final, so when you hold salt in your hand, see it differently. It is not weakness, it is not superstition. It is one of the most ancient and universal symbols of strength against decay and destruction. And when you combine it with faith, it becomes more than a symbol, it becomes a weapon. Darkness never operates without permission. This is one of the most important truths to understand. The unseen forces that try to hold people in bondage cannot simply attach themselves wherever they choose. They gain access through what we call legal rights. These are openings, agreements, or permissions that allow curses and negativity to remain. It could be words spoken over you, promises made in ignorance, habits of sin left unchecked, or even ancestral patterns passed down through generations. Once that permission exists, darkness takes advantage of it and builds its home there. Think of it like a contract. If someone signs a paper giving away ownership of their land, then by law, that land no longer belongs to them. It doesn't matter if they regret it later, the signature has already given authority to another. In the same way, when we or our ancestors open the door through words, actions, or agreements, the unseen realm records it, and until that contract is broken, the enemy has a legal right to stay. That is why so many people feel like they are fighting battles that never end, because they are wrestling against rights that were never cancelled. This is where the act of cleansing becomes so powerful. When you take something as symbolic as salt and intentionally use it in your space, you are not just performing a physical action. You are declaring in the unseen world that the contract is broken, that the permission has been revoked. The salt is not the power itself, it is the statement, the faith, and the authority behind it that matters. Just as a signature on paper can transfer ownership, your spoken words combined with a physical act can transfer authority back into your hands. When salt is poured into the place of disposal, you are saying, every right the enemy had here is revoked. Every agreement that was signed without my knowledge is cancelled. Every curse that claimed a place in my life has no home here anymore. You are flushing away not just physical waste, but spiritual rights that once gave darkness a foothold. And because the unseen world recognizes faith and authority, that act becomes final. It is important to understand that the enemy thrives on ignorance. If you do not know your authority, you will continue to live as if you are powerless. But the moment you realize that you have the right to cancel what was signed against you, everything begins to change. Salt becomes the seal of that cancellation, a visible act of an invisible shift. So the battle is not about how strong the curse is, the battle is about whether the permission remains. Once the legal ground is removed, darkness has no choice but to leave. And this is how you begin to break every chain that has held you bound. When people first hear about putting salt in the toilet, they may laugh or dismiss it as strange. But there is a deeper meaning hidden in this act. And once you understand it, you will never see it as ordinary again. The toilet is not just another place in your home. It is the space where all things unwanted, unclean, and unnecessary are flushed away, never to return. Spiritually, it represents disposal, removal, and permanent separation. When you pour salt into this space, you are not only dealing with the physical, but also making a statement in the unseen realm that what has attached itself to your life, but does not belong, will be removed, and it will not come back. There is power in symbolism. When you throw away trash, you are not only clearing your house, you are clearing your mind. When you wash your body, you are not only cleaning the skin, you are refreshing your spirit. The toilet is the ultimate symbol of rejection. It says, this no longer has value. This no longer has a place here. So imagine what happens when you connect that symbol with faith and intention. You are declaring to every curse, every negative energy, every spiritual blockage, you no longer have a place in my life, and I flush you out completely. Salt in this space adds a second layer of meaning. It is not just removal, it is purification. Because salt does not allow decay to remain, it transforms the toilet from being only a place of disposal into a place of cleansing. Whatever is removed is not simply thrown out, it is purified as it goes. This ensures that no residue of darkness remains, no trace of corruption lingers, no open door is left behind. You are cutting ties with the past in a way that is final, complete, and undeniable. This is why using salt in the toilet is more than a physical act, it is a prophetic act. It is a declaration that the cycle of carrying burdens and flushing them out only to have them return is broken. What leaves is gone permanently. You no longer carry it in your body, in your home, or in your spirit. And every time you perform this act with faith, you reinforce the truth that your life is a space of cleansing, not contamination. So, the next time you take salt in your hand and release it into that place of disposal, don't see it as a ritual, see it as a declaration. See it as an act of authority. See it as you standing tall and say, enough. What is not mine to carry, I will not carry. What is not meant for me, I will not keep. And what does not belong in my life is being flushed away for good. The salt in itself is nothing more than a mineral. It has no power unless it is used with intention. This is the mistake many people make. They focus only on the physical act, thinking that pouring salt alone will shift their life. But what truly brings transformation is not the salt by itself, it is the faith and authority you combine with it. Without faith, salt remains just grains of white crystals. With faith, it becomes a tool, a weapon, and a declaration that shifts the unseen. Faith is what separates an empty ritual from a living act of power. Two people can do the same thing, but the results will be completely different. One may pour salt with no belief, no declaration, no authority, and see nothing happen. The other may pour it with conviction, with words of power spoken from their heart, and watch as heaviness begins to lift, doors begin to open, and chains begin to fall. The difference is not in the salt. The difference is in the faith that activates it. Your words carry life or death. Every time you speak while holding that salt, you are releasing energy that the unseen realm responds to. If you declare freedom, the chains begin to break. If you declare cleansing, corruption begins to flee. If you declare protection, darkness is forced to step back. Salt simply becomes the physical carrier of your words, the symbol that seals your intention. It is like a pen. You can hold it in your hand all day, but unless you write, it records nothing. Salt works the same way. Unless you speak and believe, it remains silent. But the moment you release your faith into it, it begins to testify on your behalf. This is why you must never underestimate the role of your own spirit in this process. Too many people believe that power lies outside of them, that they are helpless victims waiting for someone else to rescue them. But when you stand up and take authority over your environment, over your home, over your mind, and over your future, you begin to discover that the greatest strength has always been inside you. Faith awakens that strength, and when it combines with action, it becomes unstoppable. So when you pour salt into the toilet, do not do it silently. Speak, declare, command, say, every curse is broken, every blockage is removed, every chain is shattered. Say it with the authority of one who knows they are heard. Say it with the conviction of one who believes the unseen world must respond, and watch how what looked like an ordinary act becomes extraordinary in its results. When you complete the act of cleansing, when you take salt with faith and release it into the place of disposal, something begins to shift around you. At first it may feel subtle, almost unnoticeable, like the atmosphere in your home becoming lighter or your thoughts becoming clearer. But as time passes, the change grows stronger. What was once heavy starts to lift. What was once blocked begins to open. You realize that the invisible weight you carried is no longer pressing down on you, because something has been broken in the unseen. This is the beauty of working in alignment with both faith and action. You may not see the curse itself leaving, but you will see the results of its absence. Where there was constant delay, movement returns. Where relationships kept falling apart, harmony begins to flow. Where finances seemed cursed, opportunities suddenly appear. And where your spirit once felt drained and hopeless, peace and strength start to fill the empty spaces. The evidence is not in what you see being flushed away. It is in the fruit that grows after the cleansing has been done. Curses are like invisible chains that hold you to the same cycle, forcing you to repeat the same pain again and again. But once they are broken, the cycle is disrupted. You step into new patterns, new possibilities, and new freedom. Life begins to respond differently because you are no longer carrying the same spiritual baggage. You have made space for blessing to flow. Just as a room that is cleaned and purified invites fresh air to enter, your life, once cleansed, invites fresh opportunities, favor, and breakthrough. The unseen realm always affects the seen. This is why so many people, after acts of cleansing and intentional declarations, report feeling lighter, calmer, or even more energized. The heaviness lifts because it no longer has permission to stay. The anxiety loosens because the atmosphere around you has shifted. The doubts begin to fade because your spirit senses that the chain is gone. You may not always be able to explain it logically, but you will feel it undeniably. And this is where you begin to live not in reaction to curses, but in alignment with blessing. Every time you take authority and act in faith, you reinforce that shift. You are no longer waiting for darkness to dictate your life. You are choosing to invite light. You are no longer held hostage by what others spoke over you. You are declaring what will be true for you. And the more you walk in this awareness, the more natural it becomes. Freedom is no longer a momentary experience, it becomes your lifestyle. So when the cleansing is done, do not simply move on as if nothing happened. Pay attention. Notice the peace, the clarity, the favor that begins to flow. And let it remind you of one simple truth: every curse can be broken, and blessings will always follow where faith has been sown.